Scrutiny Commission on Wednesday the 8th of April. Please note that the meeting is not open to the public at the moment because of the situation on public gatherings. Today's meeting of the Scrutiny Commission, as is usual, the meeting is being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch the footage live, the webcast will be available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Now, due to the current situation, all members of the Scrutiny Commission and officers presenting today are joining online. Firstly, can I go round and ask everyone to introduce themselves? Can I start with Anthony Cross, please?
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Can I check that everyone can hear me?
I can hear you fine, Anthony.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman. My name's Anthony Cross. I'm Head of Law at Leicestershire County Council, and I'm the Legal Advisor to the Scrutiny Commission. It's very important to remind everybody that we are probably making history here as one of the first local authorities having a meeting under the regulations that allow for virtual meetings. So I do wish everybody well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Anthony. Dr. Feltham.
Oops. Hello there, Chairman. Yes, I'm here. I've been joining the meeting later.
Thank you, Karen. Dr. Einan.
Hello, yes, I was just unmuting my microphone. It's Terry Einan. I am the Labour Group Leader and one of the Scrutiny Commissioners and sitting in this meeting.
Thank you. Joanna Gill.
Good morning, everybody. Joanna Gill here. I'm the Assistant Director for Environment and Waste, and we'll be covering one of the agenda items later this morning. Thanks.
Thank you, Joanna. Joanna Toomey.
Hello, I'm Joanne Toomey from Democratic Services.
Thank you, Joanne. Alan Pearson.
Hello, Alan Pearson, Melton Mowbray, Chair of the Transport and Environment. Good morning, everybody.
Thank you, Alan. Blake Payne, please.
Hello, Blake Payne here, Acting Deputy Leader. I'm also the lead member for the Environment Portfolio, here to support an agenda item on the revised environment strategy.
Thank you, Blake. Mr. David Bill.
Morning, everybody. David Bill here, County Councillor for Hinckley, and I'd like to say how wonderful it is to be able to see you all and hear from you. And many thanks also to Joanne and Kat for being so patient with me with the IT. It is appreciated.
Thank you. Dan Harrison, please.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. County Councillor for Appleby and Ibstock. Thank you.
Mr. Ivan Old.
Thank you, Simon. Ivan Old, lead member for Children and Families, obviously joining for the Youth Defending Team paper.
Thank you, Ivan. Mr. Geoffrey Kaufman.
Thank you, Chairman. Geoffrey Kaufman, a substitute member, I think, for Bill Bolter, a member for Opie.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Mr. Michael Wire. Can you hear me, Michael? I can see your microphone's on, but you're not. I don't think you're coming through. I'll move on and come back to you. Mr. Peter Bedford.
Morning, Chairman. Peter Bedford here, one of the Conservative Scrutiny Commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Mr. Terry Richardson.
Thank you, Chairman. Terry Richardson here, Councillor for Narborough and North Western.
Thank you, Terry. This is Hilary Fryer.
Good morning, Chairman. Hilary Fryer here, County Councillor for Quorn and Barrow, and also Chairman of Children and Families.
Okay, thank you, Hilary. Mrs. Rosita Page. Are you with us, Rosita? Hello, Rosita.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
You are there. Yep.
Good. Good morning, everybody. Rosita Page here, Lutterworth Division County Councillor and Vice Chairman to this committee.
Thank you, Rosita. Zafar Salim.
Good morning, Chairman. Zaf Salim, Head of Service within the Chief Executive Department, and I'll be speaking to one of the papers.
Thank you very much, Zafar. And my name's Simon Galton. I'm County Councillor for Lawn Division and the Chairman of the Scrutiny Commission and the Chairman of this morning's meeting. Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to go back to Michael Wyatt. I can see his microphone is on. I don't think he's able to be heard. So I guess the other option there is that Michael could phone in on a telephone or a mobile and take place on an audio. I wonder if Kat or someone could perhaps get in touch with him and advise him that that might be an alternative way.
Yeah, Kat's already been in touch and he's making arrangements to dial in shortly, so...
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, before we begin the formal part of the meeting, I'd just like to make a short statement. As a country, we're going through a very difficult time. I would like to take this opportunity to reassure members and the public that as a council we are doing all we can to support the most vulnerable in our society. The staff of the County Council have adapted to their working practices and are working tirelessly to support and protect the residents of the county. I'm sure that all members would wish to join me to thank all staff involved in delivering direct services and those behind the scenes providing support services for the work to date, and to ask them to continue this work for the duration of this emergency. As mentioned, this meeting is proceeding by Skype. It is going to be only considering items which have been identified as necessary before they are referred to the Cabinet or full Council for approval in due course. Other non-essential items are being deferred and will be kept under review by the Scrutiny Commissioners over the coming weeks. Skype offers a great opportunity for us to continue to operate meetings, and for the Council has adapted to this well and has set up to manage this situation. However, the need for meetings must be balanced against other more pressing matters which the Council is having to respond to, so we will be keeping that under constant review. So thank you very much. Moving to the minutes of the meeting. The last meeting was held on the 11th of March. May I propose that the minutes of the meeting are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Rosita, would you second that?
Yes, Rosita Page, and I second.
Thank you, Rosita. Anyone have a problem or disagree with that? Okay, we'll take that as read. Item 2, question time. There are no questions, all that have been received. Item 3, nor are any questions from members under Standing Order 7.3 or 7.5. I'm not advised today that there are any urgent items that need to be taken elsewhere on this agenda. Item 5, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Do any members have any declarations they wish to make today?
None for me, as the usual standard ones, as District Councillor.
Okay, so any double-hatted member will declare a non-pecuniary interest. Are there any other declarations? Don't tell me that you haven't got one, just if you have, please. Okay, thank you. Item 6, declarations of the party whip. Does anyone wish to declare the party whip today? No, I'll assume that's the case that they don't. Presentation of petitions under Standing Order 35. There are no petitions today. Before we move to consider the substantive items on the agenda, can I remind members to please ask members to allow officers to present the full report before seeking to ask questions. As we are all joining online, to ensure everyone has an opportunity to speak, I propose that once the officers have finished presenting the item, I'll ask the relevant lead member to make any comments they wish to make today, and then I will open up for questions. To indicate that you have questions, please unmute your microphone, and then I will call you in the order that you've let me know that you wish to speak. So if you just unmute your microphone, I will be able to see that you wish to speak. Of course, if that doesn't work, then please just chip in and say you want to speak, and I'll make a note of it. To be sure everyone has their say, I will finalise by quickly calling on all members to ask if you have anything you wish to add before we move on to the next item or reach a conclusion. Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have any queries about the process or the way that the meeting's taking place, or any issues of concern?
Simon, I was wondering if the instant message might be a way of people alerting you to them wanting to speak. Would that work? Can we ask Joanne?
Okay, does one of the officers want to comment on the messaging ability and whether that could be used?
Yeah, you can instant message, and you can either do it through the meeting so everybody can see, or directly to me, and we'll do our best to forward that to Mr. Colton as they come up. Whatever everybody's comfortable with.
Okay, but as I say, if you simply unmute your microphone, I'll get an indication that you wish to speak. Right then, so moving to the items we're going to consider today. The first is the Council's revised environment strategy, strategic plan, sorry, got that round the wrong way. The first item we are taking today is the revised strategic plan, item 8. And Zafar Salim, Head of Communities, Policy and Resilience, will present this item. So if you'd like to start, Zafar, when you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The report is relatively straightforward, and what I'll try and do, which I hope is helpful, is just run through the relevant sections, and because we're all on Skype, I'll try and highlight the paragraph numbers as well. So starting off at the top in paragraph 1, what this aims to do is the purpose of the report is to highlight the changes to the Council's strategic plan. The plan itself is a 4-year plan and strategy in the same way most strategic documents at the Council are. Ordinarily, or in the ordinary course of events, we would have started the process of reviewing the strategy at the back end of this year, so perhaps October, November this year. However, following the declaration of the climate change emergency, which is referred to in paragraph 3 there, it was felt that the urgency of the matter required us to make immediate changes to the strategic plan rather than let it run its full length. And also, at the same time, we have the outcomes framework that runs alongside the strategic plan, and it was felt that if we made the changes at the very high level, that would then influence all the plans that sit beneath the strategic plan, such as the individual departments, commissioning plans, business plans, and that filters down to an officer's individual PDR process as well. So in that way, we retain the golden thread from exactly what an officer's doing all the way up to the top of the organisation and the other way as well. So hence the need to make some changes in a year rather than let the plan run its full course. In terms of the changes themselves, what in effect we've tried to do is strengthen the language, terminology and intention of the plan, so there's no doubt whatsoever to the reader that the Council is taking climate change seriously, and following my item, Joe will be on to talk about the changes to the environment strategy as well. So if I can turn to paragraph 7, that just basically highlights the light touch changes that we've made. I think the first one to pull out is 7B, which is we've now got a very specific environmental principle. So there's now 2 overarching principles, one on equality and diversity, and secondly around environmental issues. And at item D there, or 7D, we've used the word sort of clean and green. We've tried to strengthen the environmental credentials of the whole report. Item E there is particularly important because what we've tried to do is be proactive. So not only are we tackling climate change, we're going to try and, as best we can, address ecological decline as well. And I think those two issues run hand in hand to some extent. And then finally, at item G there, what we've tried to do is put in success measures that are achievable, because one of the things that has come up through consultation with officers, elected members and partners is to be realistic in terms of what we can actually achieve. And I know Joe will cover that a little bit more in the environmental strategy as well. So we're reasonably confident, because we've been working with the Council's performance team, that the measures we put in place are those which are smart, so they are measurable, they are achievable, they are realistic, and they can be delivered within reasonable timescales. And more importantly, in terms of resource implications there, we can afford to make those changes because potentially this is the most significant thing that we're going to do, notwithstanding the current COVID-19 emergency as well. In terms, finally, just in terms of decision making and timetable, we're running towards the end of the process. This has gone through various internal working groups, including corporate management team, for chief officer sign off. It's also gone to Environment, Transport, Overview and Scrutiny Committee in March. Following today's meeting, if members are minded to support the report, it'll then go through to Cabinet and then eventually to full council, so that it becomes a key strategy and plan of the local authority. That's as much as I was going to say for the moment, Mr. Galton. I'm happy to take questions.
No, that's fine. That's a very, very comprehensive introduction that you've made to the plan. So what I'm going to do now is open it up for members' questions. Now, there was an ability to submit some questions in writing by email beforehand, and Dr. Inan, Terry Inan, did do that. So I'm going to ask Terry first to put her questions.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question on this particular paper relates to the points made about housing, which I'm very pleased to see. I think this is this is an excellent change of the document, and as you know, we're very supportive of the climate change agenda. It says on page on 31, both existing and new homes will be low carbon and environmentally sustainable, and we've also got a comment about working in partnership with other organisations. So my question here is, how can we improve the way that we work with planning authorities? At the moment, I think we don't have perhaps as much influence over local plans as perhaps we need to have, not just the construction of houses, but also their placement, so that we don't have a default model in our society of commuting.
So let me just understand your question right. Your question is how do we, as a county council, influence more the planning process? Are you wanting us to do that?
Well, yeah, I think I'd like to welcome the fact that we're working in partnership with others, but I do think that working much more closely with the planning authorities, prior to any kind of unitary status, it would be stronger statements about the need for what they're doing and what we're doing to marry up.
Okay. Zephyr, are you able to?
If I may, I think I would the sentiments of the statement that's just made by Dr. Inan. In terms of reassurance, I think certainly our other partners such as the City Council and Rutland, certainly all the statutory local authorities take climate change environmental issues extremely seriously. In terms of the different stages or different levels in this, clearly whilst we're not the planning authority as has been stated, we are consulted in detail in terms of local neighbourhood plans, and those documents do come through to us via our district colleagues, and we look at them and shape them and make comments on them where necessary. Similarly, there is a Chief Planning Officers group, which Nick Thomas, who's our head of planning, attends, and in fact he chairs that group. So we are working very closely with planning officers on the detail of our approach. Similarly, at that more strategic level, there is a strategic growth plan, and again, that's coordinated with partners and the business sector such as ALEP as well. So I think we're influencing matters as best we can, and I think there is a general understanding about what we're collectively trying to achieve. Plus there are various tools at our disposal, such as planning regulations, planning obligations, for example, also decent home standards, and I think given the importance of the agenda, and those various regulations the government has put in terms of environmental standards, home heating standards, being carbon neutral, removing gas boilers, using more sustainable methods to heat homes, as well as sustainable infrastructure. I think there's probably enough there, I think, to reassure elected members that we are working collaboratively with our planning colleagues at a district level to make sure that we stick to the commitments within this document and other documents. There probably is more that we can do, and obviously we'd welcome any ideas as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Are you okay with that, Terry?
Thank you. That is very reassuring, and I hope we can have a statement about that in the minutes. That's great.
Okay, I've got a few members that have indicated they wish to speak, but just before that, Anthony Cross just wanted to make a reference to the growth unit that the council's setting up. Anthony.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And just to follow on from what Zaffar's very helpfully said to explain the County Council's limited influence, I suppose it is right to say, with regard to district council planning decisions, which are taken by the district councils by reference to their local plan. But I would just like to mention that the County Council set up a growth unit, although that is primarily to deal with ensuring that planning obligations in relation to County Council functions and matters are properly applied for and available. I'm sure as the growth unit develops, it will seek to want to influence the local planning authorities in how they deal with planning issues about density and in terms of complying with requirements in connection with greenery and issues of that nature. So I think the County Council will have some opportunity of influence, although that won't be the prime responsibility of the growth unit, but as I say, it will have a role. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I've got David Bill next.
Yes, thank you, Simon. Could I just say that we live in such sensitive times that I want to choose my words very carefully and perhaps preface everything by saying I'd like to pay a personal tribute to all those in our public services who are working so hard to keep everybody safe. But this report, which we saw at the Environment Scrutiny Commission a month ago, was written well over a month ago, quite clearly. And our world has now changed out of all recognition. The assumptions in the report, the assumptions on which the report must have been based, have to be looked at again. I know there's a recovery plan which is being led by the County Council, and I hope that we can all see a copy of that as soon as possible. But in the meantime, can I suggest that we need to ask the Cabinet how this report is to be revised in the light of all that has happened? I don't need to spell it out, but I don't think things are going to return to normal, even if they ever do. with so many people suffering in so many different ways, it can't be business as usual. Therefore, could I suggest that we ask the Cabinet to look at this again in the light of the circumstances in which we now all find ourselves in?
Okay, David, thank you for that. I'll ask for some comment. I mean, obviously, a lot of issues will change. The priority will change, and the things the County Council are having to do in the short term are obviously completely different than they were a month ago, and the focus and so on. But maybe things will never get back to completely normal or how they were as we perceived it. So to that extent, how do you think this report is going to need to take account of recent events and a recovery plan?
Thank you. I think that's a fair point, Mr. Bill. I think things have changed significantly. Myself and many colleagues, including Joe there, we're involved in various stages. We're certainly involved at the moment managing the actual response to the incidents across a series of cells, which I'm sure members have been briefed on in terms of the information that's come out from the leader and the chief executive. And simultaneously, Ian Veers is leading on a recovery plan that Mr. Bill's referred to on behalf of the whole of the LRF, and that covers the whole of the footprint across the city, Rutland and the county, and obviously includes the districts as well. So the difficulty, if I'm up front, is that the situation is so dynamic because the response stage and the recovery stage, there will be a middle ground where they merge into each other. At the moment, what we're trying to do is do some forecasting and scenario planning to try and anticipate what the new normal will be. And I would agree with the statement that's been made, is the new normal won't be business as usual. However, there are things that we can reassure members that officers are looking at even at this early stage. A simple one is, for example, we're all on Skype. Therefore, officers and elected members are not driving to County Hall. That in itself would reduce the carbon footprint. There's possibly this has more than nudged. It's a step change in the way we will deliver services, and potentially we need to think realistically about what services that the council, together with the partners, will provide, able to provide, or should provide, given that the needs and demands are going to change more significantly, and the emphasis on supporting the most vulnerable, not just those on that list of 1.5 million that's been circulated, but other categories of vulnerable people that we're seeking to support. And it may require in the short term some changes to the medium-term financial strategy, for example, and as Councillor Bill has said, some changes to the planning assumptions. And so I think all of those are valid points, and it would be worthwhile. I suppose I'd have to have a discussion with Anthony about the actual process of capturing some of the thoughts and views and comments of the members from today, and then feeding that into the discussion at Cabinet.
I won't worry too much about that, because the minutes of the meeting will reflect a general theme of the discussion. So Mr. Bill's views will be raised, and later on towards the end we'll try and sum up and get some conclusions that we want to send to the Cabinet, where hopefully we've got some consensus to ask them to look at things. I did note in the report, though, that you did say this was kind of a light touch review, and it would be necessary to have a further review of this plan next year. That's right, is it?
Yeah, so we can. I think this was a light touch to review to improve the environmental aspects of the current strategic plan, so it was referenced in the individual business plans, commissioning plans, etc. There will be a fuller review towards the end of this year, so anything such as the changes in the way we're going to potentially deliver services and reprioritisation of services could be picked up as part of a much bigger review.
Okay, Thank you very much for that. Now, Jo Gill, she just wanted to make a comment how this relates to the work that the environment strategy. I know we're going to talk about that later, but it's relevant to this discussion. So can I just bring Jo in, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I think Zaf has covered a lot of what I was potentially going to say, but just going back to Dr. Einen's point, certainly in terms of the carbon reduction roadmap, which we'll come on to under the next item, it's broken down into 2 tranches, and whilst today we'll be concentrating on tranche 1, tranche 2 looks at wider Leicestershire carbon, and just very briefly, roughly a third of that wider carbon around Leicestershire comes from domestic sources, which includes housing. So on the planning point, there is a huge opportunity and a challenge in equal measure, but certainly the district councils and ourselves and other key partners are all aware that that opportunity exists. If you think about the timescales out to 2050 in the case of wider Leicestershire carbon, we will see a sea change in what housing looks like in terms of addressing the point that was made. And just on the point that Councillor Bill made around potentially revising approach, recognising that Zaf has already said this is light touch, as you said, Chairman. The action plan for the carbon reduction and the environment strategy is a live document, so it will react. It's designed to be very agile, so we are already, and I will touch on it in my presentation, recognising that our timescales will have to alter as opposed to what the original ambition was. But it doesn't alter the ambition still exists, so we will be realistic, recognising it could take months or a few years to react to what's happened in recent weeks, but we will still behind the scenes be looking at sort of revisiting our ambition. And just maybe to finish on a positive, there are lots of negative things happening at the minute, but Zafar mentioned the point, environmentally, less traffic, transport, emissions, carbon. If we make a sea change to how the authority chooses to work, there will be some substantial benefits around our carbon reduction commitment. Thank you.
Well, I'm really glad you picked that up, because it is difficult to see any positive issues at all coming out of this crisis. But you know, you can actually now hear the birds in the morning where I live instead of traffic going through, and the reduction in car use must be having an impact on pollution. And you know, maybe it will mean we won't have to build so many new roads in the future. But I think it's important to try and capture those sorts of issues as we go forward. So I've now got Dan Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the district councils, I have a concern. I sit on a planning committee of a district council, and I know the overt attitude is generally that the applicants come in and they're probably mainly large companies, large developers, and they sort of put their way through sort of how they progress it and how they then will go to the district valuer and say it's unprofitable, and he'll agree that they don't have to build affordable homes. There's a whole change that needs to take place. Now, I think the only way that can be, it's not goodwill and sitting around the table. We have to have proper, perhaps a review of legislation, government, because we need to have an influence and we need to have a strong voice. But unless we have a pathway in which we know we can proceed down, it is all but goodwill, and goodwill won't be enough, I don't feel, as a member of a planning committee, listening to how applications are presented to us and a whole range of different attitudes. I think we should clearly be looking at the garden town concepts involving our own national forest look. But to be able to do that, it's not just convincing the planning officers, it's having a whole sea change of attitudes towards local planning and particularly housing. Thank you, Chairman.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying there in terms of needing a sea change attitude. I'm going to take that as a positive comment, Dan, and I'm going to move on now to Jeff Kaufman.
Hello, thank you, Chairman. Good morning. First of all, can I take the opportunity of thanking everyone at County Hall, all the officers, for what they've done. to make this meeting become possible, all the assistance they've given me to make sure I personally can participate, and for the work that they've done. I very much agree with the views of David Bill. I'm very concerned that this document that we have in front of us